Good afternoon. I'm Ilsa Connect, and I'm the Deputy Director of Public Policy for the National Center for Victims of Crime. I want to welcome everyone to today's web seminar on Katie's Law and DNA arrestee testing laws. A few people are still logging in, but I want to go over a couple housekeeping issues while we have those folks getting signed on. Today, the audio for this webinar is coming over your computer speakers. So if you're having trouble with that, you should try to turn on or adjust your computer speakers. You can also call into the teleconference if you have trouble with the sound over your speakers. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please call WebEx support at 866-229-3239. I want to let everyone know that all the participants today are muted upon entry to the call, so we won't be taking calls, questions verbally, but you will be able to ask a question using the question and answer tool in the WebEx system. The question and answer panel may be either on the right side of your screen as one of those panels you see there. You might have to maximize it by clicking on the little arrow next to it, or you may see it as a floating toolbar as you see here on your screen. Also, you may have to click on the question mark icon on the floating toolbar to open the question and answer tool. You can type your question in the small box and hit the send button. Your questions won't be seen by anyone but the panelists and myself. So you can, and if we don't get to your question today, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentation today, but if we don't get to your question today, we will follow up with you by email. We'll try to answer all the questions if we have time. I want to just tell you a little bit about the National Center for Victims of Crime before I turn the webinar over to our presenter, Jayann Sepich. The National Center for Victims of Crime is a nonprofit organization that advocates for victims' rights and resources and is a trusted source of information on victims' issues for all victims of crime. We are committed to advancing victims' rights and helping victims of crime rebuild their lives. We do this through providing training and technical assistance to those who work with victims of crime and those who interact with victims of crime. And we also work with Congress to secure funding for victim services programs and for victims' rights. We also house the National Stalking Resource Center, and we are a leader on youth victims of crime issues. Many of this information, much information about these programs are on our website. If you want to visit our website, that's also right here, www.ncvc.org. We're very pleased to bring you this webinar today with the support of Life Technologies. Life Technologies is a DNA technology company that has graciously supported our work through the years to increase knowledge about the power of forensic DNA and how DNA technology can be used to assist criminal investigations. With their support, we have conducted webinars, trainings, we've developed materials about forensic DNA for victims and law enforcement professionals who work with victims. And this is the web address for our online DNA Resource Center website. And all the materials that we've produced, our archived webinars, and announcements for future webinars and trainings will be found at our DNA Resource Center. And this is my contact information if you want to email me with any questions or tell us how we're doing in our work, or if you have any suggestions, we'd be glad to hear from you. We're really happy to have Jayann Sepich here with us today. She is a mother, a homicide survivor, and an advocate whose daughter, Katie, was brutally raped and murdered. Since that time, Ms. Sepich and her family have traveled the country and the world to ensure that all 50 states pass legislation to mandate DNA testing upon felony arrest, and it's also known as Katie's Law. She has been honored by Governor Bill Richardson of New Mexico as an outstanding New Mexico woman of 2007 and was inducted into the New Mexico Women's Hall of Fame. She was also honored by Red Book magazine in October 2008 with their Strength and Spirit Award. Ms. Sepich and her husband recently co-founded DNA Saves to educate policymakers and the public about the value of forensic DNA. She is a very powerful force to be reckoned with, and she will talk to anyone who listens to her about the power of DNA, and I'm very glad to have her here today to tell you her story and to discuss why Katie's Law is so important to solving and preventing crime. And now I'm going to hand over the floor to Jayann Sepich.
Thank you, Elsa. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I want to thank all of you who have logged on today. It's really a privilege and a pleasure to be able to talk with you, to share my story with you. I believe all of us share a common passion, the passion for justice. We all care deeply about finding the perpetrators of horrible crimes and seeing that justice is served. The science of DNA allows us to not only solve crimes, bringing justice, but has the power to prevent crime. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, which is a small town of about 25,000 people, and it's located literally in the middle of nowhere. The nearest city is El Paso, Texas, which is about 3 hours away. My dad was a small-town attorney, and my mother was a school teacher. I graduated from college, married my high school sweetheart. We lived all over the United States due to my husband's job, and then we decided to move back to Carlsbad. We started a family, a small business, enjoyed a circle of close and loving friends, and lived a quiet, uneventful, small-town life. That is until Labor Day weekend 2003. Let me introduce you to my family. This is my family. My husband Dave and I were high school sweethearts. My son AJ, I'm having trouble with this advancing. Let me see if I can get it to work. Okay, it seems to have locked up. I'll just continue and hopefully it'll catch up. This is my son AJ. He's a graduate of the University of New Mexico. He lives in Denver, where he works. And my daughter Caroline, it's not progressing.
I think it'll come in just a second. Sorry, okay. I don't know. The system seems to be a little slow.
Okay, I'm just going to go on, and we'll try to catch up. My daughter Caroline is a 17-year-old high school senior. She's very, very interested in math and science. She's a self-professed nerd, and she's also a competitive dancer. But it's my firstborn that is the reason I'm here today, Katie. At 22 years old, Katie was a vivacious graduate student at New Mexico State University, pursuing a master's in business administration. And you can tell by looking at her that she was a beautiful young woman. But she was a lot more than that. She entered the world bright-eyed and feisty, and that never changed. From the moment she was born, she was loved and adored by her family. As a little girl, she was creative, she was inventive, she loved loved the world of play. This is where she was Captain Hook for Halloween. We called her Kamikaze Katie because she truly was fearless, and there was nothing she was afraid to try. She was incredibly bright. She was a 5-time state champion in Odyssey of the Mind and a world champion, attended the world championships 5 times. But that didn't mean that Katie didn't have incredible charm. Everyone loved Katie. Our house was always bursting at the seams with Katie's friends. She was the kind of daughter that everyone wants to have. I always said that if Katie loved you, she loved you like a freight train. I'm catching up on the pictures here. It's finally starting to work. We woke up August 31st, 2003. It was Labor Day weekend. It was a hot, sunny, beautiful day. We were getting ready for a barbecue. All of our friends were on their way over. Our life was wonderful. Our son AJ had just graduated from high school. He had graduated with honors and was getting ready to go to the University of New Mexico on a full presidential scholarship. Caroline was a happy, healthy 4th grader, and Katie had just received her degree in business and started the MBA program. We had just moved into our dream home. It was a home that we had built much with our own hands. Our business was doing well. Our world was absolutely wonderful. And then the phone rang, and our life was shattered at 2:15 in the afternoon with just 6 words. Have you talked to Katie today? Katie had gone to a party the night before and had had an argument with her boyfriend. She had stormed out to walk the 5 blocks home without her purse, her phone, or her keys, and no one had seen her since. Her roommate, Tracy, was calling, hoping we knew where she was. Tracy had called all of her friends, even the local hospitals, and they couldn't find Katie. We told Tracy to file a missing persons report. Katie's daddy, Dave, immediately headed out for Las Cruces to look for her. When he got to her house, he was met by a victim's advocate and the Doña Ana County Sheriff. When Tracy had filed the missing persons report, the authorities knew that the body they had found in an old city dump was most probably Katie. Dave had to go to the morgue to identify his precious Katie. Katie had been viciously raped, sodomized, strangled, and her body set on fire. Dave told me later that at the moment they pulled the sheet back and he had to see her burned and broken body, he felt a pain so intense that he thought he would not be able to take another breath. No father should ever have to live that moment. No parent should. Our joyous, vivacious, loving Katie was dead, and she had been brutalized. I can't explain the horror, the excruciating pain. To this day, I really don't have the words. I can only say that we were all plunged into a pit so black, so deep and hopeless, that we thought we would never see light again. We knew the last thing we could do for Katie was to give her a beautiful funeral, and it was a beautiful funeral. Over 1,200 people crowded into our small church to say goodbye. It turned into a true celebration of Katie's life as person after person told stories about Katie, things we had never known. And I can tell you the pain was unbearable. Leaving my daughter at the cemetery that day was the hardest moment of my life. How could I go on? How could I leave her? But Dave, Caroline, AJ, and I sat together in our backyard under a very starry and beautiful New Mexico sky and pledged that we would go on, that we would hold each other up, and that we would not let this monster that had murdered Katie destroy our family. We pledged that we would find joy in living again, and we knew that in order to heal, we needed to find this man and stop him. We desperately needed justice, but even more, we needed to know that he would be stopped from doing this to someone else. There were very few clues. Then Captain Robert Jones, who was in charge of the investigation of Katie's murder, told us that Katie had fought so hard for her life that the skin and blood of her attacker had been found under all 10 of her fingernails. He went on to say that the DNA found there had been digitized and uploaded into the National Forensic DNA database called CODIS. He said about once a week it would be cross-referenced with the offender database to look for a match. This gave us bright hope, and I made the offhand comment that the man that killed Katie was such a monster that surely he would be arrested for something else, and the match would be made. He would be caught and never be able to hurt another young woman again. That's when Captain Jones said, "Oh no, Jayann, it's illegal in New Mexico and almost every other state to take DNA upon arrest. We can't take it until after a conviction." I couldn't believe it because I knew we take fingerprints when someone is arrested. We take mug shots, but we don't take DNA, the most accurate, powerful scientific tool available. I started looking into cases that have been solved with DNA. I found case studies that talk about how crimes could have been prevented if DNA were taken upon arrest. The city of Chicago did a study that followed 8 convicted felons. If their DNA had been taken upon their first arrest, 60 violent crimes, including 53 rapes and murders, would have been prevented. There are also other studies that have been done. The Office of the Governor of Maryland did a study. Uh-oh. I'll try to find where I am.
Oh, somehow we got back to the, let me see.
I'm going to try to find it. The Office of the Governor of Maryland identified 20 violent crimes that could have been prevented if arrestee DNA had been used. And the Denver District Attorney's Office released a study of 47 violent crimes that could have been prevented if DNA had been collected upon felony arrest for just 5 individuals. But it was when I found the case of Chester Dwayne Turner in Chicago that I knew the true power of arrestee DNA. You see, Chester Turner in Chicago, Chester Turner had been arrested 21 times over a period of 15 years. 21 times before his DNA was ever collected. He was finally convicted of rape, and his DNA was taken, and it matched the DNA that was found on 12 rape and murder victims. The first victim was murdered 2 months after his first arrest. Jayann Johnson was murdered on March 29, 1987. He went on to rape and murder Annette Ernest, Anita Fishman, Regina Washington, Deborah Williams, Mary Edwards, Andrea Triplett, Desiree Jones, Natalie Price, Mildred Beasley, Paula Vance, and Brenda Breeze. These are not just names. These are women. They are daughters. Some were mothers. Every one of these women was important to someone. Everyone grieved when they were murdered. It was at this moment that I knew that these laws had to be changed. There were so many lives to be saved, so much pain that could be prevented. Fathers that would not have to see the faces of their daughters in a morgue. Mothers that would not have to leave their child in a cemetery. Brothers and sisters that would not have to give up their best friend. Had Chester Turner's DNA been taken after his first felony arrest, it is probable that 11 of these women would still be alive. He could have been stopped after the first murder. 1 cheek swab, 11 women saved, plus 2 unborn babies, because 2 of these women were very pregnant at the time of their murder. And to make matters worse, a man named David Jones had served 11 years in prison, wrongfully convicted of 2 of these murders. When that DNA match was made, he was released from prison. 1 cheek swab, 13 lives saved, prevented an innocent man from spending 11 years in prison. That's the power of arrestee DNA. That's when I knew that taking DNA upon arrest would not only solve crimes, it would prevent crimes, save lives, and exonerate the innocent. That's when I started asking questions. Why isn't DNA taken upon felony arrest? I was told it was an invasion of privacy. It's a violation of civil rights. I was told that since DNA contains sensitive genetic information, it is different from fingerprints. That's when I started doing research and learning all I could about DNA. I talked to genetic scientists, PhDs in genetics. I talked to the genetic scientists that actually developed the CODA system and learned that it has been designed specifically to guard privacy and civil rights, that the DNA profile contains absolutely no genetic information whatsoever. The DNA strand has over 3 billion markers, and only 13 of these markers go into CODIS. That's all, 13 pairs of numbers. And these 13 markers were specifically chosen by genetic scientists because they have no genetic information. They are merely spacers in the strand. The DNA profile in the database cannot reveal any genetic, medical, or private information. So then, because I'm not a scientist and I really don't have a scientific background, I asked for an explanation from these PhDs in genetics that I could understand, kind of a CODIS for dummies. And I was told that it was kind of like looking at a 33 RPM record album. When you look at that album, you can see the bands that contain the music. But in between the bands are the spaces that contain no music. And those are the markers that go into the database. What's more, there are no names or Social Security numbers in CODIS. The CODIS profile contains a code number, and that is a specimen ID number, and that is what's used to identify that specimen. And it's never matched or never revealed who that belongs to until after a match is made. This is a slide that shows exactly what goes into the CODIS DNA profile. You'll notice there's a lab identifier, lab XYZ, and then the number underneath that is the specimen ID number. And then there are numbers that denote the 13 markers that I was talking about. There are 2 numbers for each marker, and then there's a lab technician's initials. So who do these markers belong to? These markers are mine. This is actually the markers that make up my CODIS profile. And I would stand out on the street and hand these out to anyone because there's nothing private about this. There's nothing that can be determined from these numbers. I wouldn't hand out my Social Security number. I wouldn't even hand out my home address. But I don't mind anyone having these because it's absolutely in no way an invasion of my privacy or a violation of my civil liberties. It's also a federal offense carrying a heavy fine and jail time to tamper with the DNA database or misuse it in any way. And since the inception of CODIS, there has never been a misuse of the DNA database. So after learning of how CODIS is designed to protect privacy, and after learning how taking DNA upon arrest would save innocent lives, our family decided that we should do what we could to see legislation passed allowing DNA to be taken upon felony arrest. So we started with our home state of New Mexico. Katie's Law was signed into law by Governor Richardson in March of 2006. It went into effect January 1st, 2007 at midnight. 1 hour and 14 minutes later, at 1:14 a.m., the first felony arrestee was swabbed at the Bernalillo County Jail in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His DNA matched a double homicide, and he was convicted of those 2 murders in September of 2008. Since January 1st, 2007, 213 cases have been matched to 182 felony arrestees in New Mexico, which means that there were multiple offenders. And this is a state with a population of right at 2 million people. It's working to identify predators earlier, which means crimes are prevented and lives are saved. So many cases solved, like that of the DNA match that solved the murder of 11-year-old Victoria Sandoval. Victoria Sandoval was sexually assaulted and killed in her grandparents' home on Halloween night, 2005. A man named Robert Gonzalez was quickly arrested in connection with the crime. However, the DNA evidence in that case did not match his own profile. Nonetheless, law enforcement and prosecutors felt certain that he was involved because he knew so much about the crime scene, and they continued with the homicide charges. Gonzalez was jailed for more than 2 years, pending various legal proceedings regarding his competency. In April of 2008, a man named Israel Diaz was arrested on felony burglary charges, and his DNA matched to the unknown profile in the Sandoval murder case. Investigators determined that Gonzalez and Diaz could never have met each other, that there was no connection between these two, and that Diaz acted alone in this crime. Gonzalez was released, and Israel Diaz was arrested for the rape and murder of Victoria Sandoval. Without arrestee DNA testing, Gonzalez may easily have been convicted in this case, despite the fact that the DNA evidence excluded him, and Diaz would have gotten away with the crime. In fact, Diaz was eventually located in federal custody after the DNA match, facing deportation as an illegal immigrant. Had Diaz's sample not been collected upon arrest for his felony crime, Gonzalez may very well have been wrongfully convicted, and Diaz would have gotten away with murder, while remaining free to potentially victimize more little girls. This case shows the power of arrestee DNA to identify perpetrators, to exonerate the innocent. As a matter of fact, in New Mexico alone, 3 men have already been exonerated of rape and murder charges as a direct result of the arrestee DNA database. Passing Katie's Law in New Mexico was very important to my family, but that was just the first step, because New Mexico was the 6th state to mandate DNA arrestee testing. So that meant at that point we had 44 more states to go. And we decided that it was important, that we felt like all 50 states should have this law. So in November of 2006, we sent out letters to every state legislator in those 44 states, telling them our story and asking that they consider passing Katie's Law or a similar law in their state. Many responded asking for information so that they could begin the process in their state. So our family embarked on our new mission in life, seeing all 50 states pass and implement legislation to take DNA upon felony arrest. Shortly after we sent out those letters, on December 18th, a miraculous event occurred. Ricky Madrid, the officer who had taken over Katie's case after Captain Jones retired, called. He was wonderful about keeping in touch with us about any progress in Katie's case, so his calls were a regular event. But I was literally stunned when he said, "We have a match." My daughter was murdered on August 31st, 2003. Less than 3 months later, a man named Gabriel Avila was arrested for aggravated burglary. But we didn't have Katie's Law at that time, so his DNA was not taken. It was over 3 years later that he was finally convicted of a felony, incarcerated, his DNA taken, and his profile matched the DNA that had been found in the skin and blood Katie had fought so hard to obtain that was found under her fingernails. Armed with this DNA match, the detectives began an intensive investigation. They found other incriminating evidence. The diamond ring that Katie had been wearing that night was found in Avila's truck. The tire tracks that were found by Katie's body matched the tires that were on Avila's truck. Faced with this evidence, Avila confessed, pled guilty, and was formally charged with Katie's murder on December 26, 2006, which ironically was Katie's 26th birthday. On May 3, 2007, Gabriel Avila was sentenced for 69 years without possibility of parole. In over 3 years of intensive investigation of Katie's murder, Gabriel Avila's name had never surfaced at any time. Had it not been for DNA, it is very probable that Avila would never have faced justice for murdering our daughter. DNA is a wonderful thing. That's the power of DNA. But the lesson to be learned in our daughter's case is the true power of arrestee DNA. If Katie's Law had been in effect in November of 2003, when Avila was arrested for aggravated burglary, he would have been caught then. All of the people who loved Katie would have had resolution 3 years sooner. The community of Las Cruces, New Mexico would have had closure 3 years sooner. But that's not the most important thing. This man who brutally raped and murdered our Katie, who less than 3 months later broke into 2 young women's apartment with a knife, this man was free for over 17 months. We may never know what he did during that time. We may never know that we may never know if he took other lives or if he committed other crimes. What we do know is that DNA upon the arrest has the power to bring closure to victims, to solve crimes, save lives, and exonerate the innocent. After Katie's case was solved and after Avila was sentenced, we learned the power of justice to bring of family healing. And this made us only more determined to see DNA arrestee testing in every state. In December of 2008, our family formed the nonprofit organization DNA Saves to help pass laws for DNA upon arrest. And we have been joined in our effort by many other families. The Surviving Parents Coalition, which includes Ed Smart, the father of Elizabeth Smart, Erin Runyon, the mother of Samantha Runyon, and Mark Lunsford, the father of Jessica Lunsford, has officially endorsed DNA arrestee testing legislation as one of their causes. John Walsh, the host of America's Most Wanted, actively campaigns for arrestee DNA. 25 states and the federal government now have arrestee DNA legislation, and we have continued this mission. Given the economic climate and the pressure on state legislatures to cut spending, passing will not be easy, but lives literally hang in the balance, so we must keep trying. We are hopeful that several of these states still may pass this year, and we have seen marvelous results. The state of Virginia was the first to actively begin taking DNA upon arrest. Virginia is nearing 700 matches. Colorado implemented their arrestee DNA law on September 30th, 2010. In the first 4 months, had 40 matches. 9 of those were to cold case rapes. California's average number of monthly hits between offender DNA profiles and DNA profiles from unsolved crime scene samples has increased from 183 per month in 2008, which was the year prior to the implementation of arrestee DNA, to over 400 hits per month. That's an increase of over 125%, which means their hit rate has more than doubled. With the advent of DNA taken upon felony arrest, California has cleared or aided in the investigation of over 50% of the unsolved cases added to its database between January 2009 and July 1, 2011, with over 9,000 matches between offender DNA database identification profiles and profiles from crime scene evidence. In order to help states with funding to implement arrestee DNA, we're working with Congress on the Jayann Sepich Expanded DNA Act of 2010. On May 18th of 2010, the United States House of Representatives passed it by a vote of 357 to 32. Unfortunately, in 2010, it did not pass the Senate, so it has to be reintroduced, and we are still working with Congress to reintroduce it and see it passed because that funding is so important. Oppositions of this legislation say it is too expensive. Yes, it does cost money to do this, but what are the costs of not using DNA upon arrest? According to the Doña Ana County, New Mexico District Attorney's Office, over $200,000 in investigatory costs were incurred on Katie's case between November 2003, when Gabriel Avila was arrested for burglary, and December 2006, when the match taken after his conviction was made. $200,000 that could have been saved. One cheek swab costing less than $50 would have saved the New Mexico taxpayers over $200,000. And it's very interesting to note that the entire DNA arrestee program in New Mexico costs $225,000 a year. There was also a study that was conducted in Indiana showing that if that state implemented arrestee DNA, the taxpayers would save $60 million per year. And the city of Denver concluded in a study which was authorized by the U.S. Department of Justice on the effectiveness of DNA evidence on property crimes that for every dollar invested in DNA, $90 is saved. DNA databasing is an investment that makes sense. We're already spending money in our criminal justice system that could be saved if we use DNA databases to their fullest potential. When we identify criminals early in their careers, we prevent crimes. This not only prevents trauma, this saves lives and saves money. DNA is truth. The criminal justice system in the United States is an adversarial system, with the prosecution on one side and the defense on the other. To them, they are interested in who wins. As a victim, as the mother of a murdered daughter, what I am interested in is justice. and truth. Justice that will prevent crimes, save lives, and exonerate the innocent. This is a map of the United States. The states in blue have passed arrestee DNA legislation. The states in white have not. I know if I were a criminal, I would go to one of the states that have not passed arrestee DNA. Because if I'm arrested for a felony in a state that has passed this law, I will be identified much sooner than I would be in a state that does not have arrestee DNA. Remember these women, Chester Turner's victims. This is a list of women that could have been saved. This is a list of lives that could be going on now, but are not. We know now that we could have saved them with arrestee DNA. Every state that has not passed this law will probably have a list of names similar to this in the future, because in the months, in the years to come, lives that could have been saved will be lost. We'll look back and say, these are women we could have saved. These are families that would not have had to face excruciating pain. These are fathers that would not have had to identify their daughters in a morgue. There are mothers that would not have had to leave their daughters at a cemetery. And to me, this is a tremendous burden. I think it's a burden that we all share. When these laws are passed in states, we will never know who will be saved. We'll never know. So I'm asking you to use your voices to insist that your states pass and implement arrestee DNA. Because using this powerful science to solve crimes, prevent crimes, exonerate the innocent, and save lives is a wonderful thing. Families like ours will be spared the agonizing pain of burying a much-loved child. So I'm asking you to do everything you can to see this law passed and implemented. We cannot change the past, but we can change the future. Thank you for your attention today, and I would like to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Jayann, for sharing Katie's story and your expertise. And I'm sorry that you have to be an expert in this subject, but you know so much about it, and I'm really thankful that you shared these stories with us, and they all really demonstrate how collecting DNA earlier in a criminal's career can really prevent more victimization and prevent more grieving families. So I really appreciate you giving us your time and sharing this with us. We have one question right now, so people can send more in if you have more. The question is, are there federal restrictions on arrestee DNA going into CODIS? And related to that, I'm assuming the question is, does the arrestee's DNA go into the offender part of CODIS, or the unknown sample part of CODIS?
The federal government does allow arrestee DNA to be uploaded into CODIS. There are certain regulations that apply. For example, a state must have a provision for expungement. If someone is arrested and not ultimately convicted, the state must have a provision to allow for expungement of that DNA, and that is a federal requirement. But absolutely, arrestee DNA is uploaded into CODIS. We've had a lot of cross-state success. We had a murder in Nevada that was there was a match to that, a cold case murder in Las Vegas because of a burglary arrest in Albuquerque. So CODIS is making a lot of cross-state matches from arrestee DNA. When it is uploaded into CODIS, it goes into the offender database. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that does. It doesn't look like we have any other questions unless a couple more come in, but you can feel free to email me if I can find that. Do you have a final PowerPoint slide with your email on it, Jayann, or no?
No, I don't, but I can. My email is Sepich, that's SEPICH, at dnasaves.org. And also, I would encourage everyone to go to our website. There's a lot of additional information on our website, which is www.dnasaves.org.
Great, thanks. I put our information up, my contact information up back here, and can also connect you to Jayann if you want to ask any other questions or want to get her to come to your state to speak. She does that a lot. Actually, a couple more questions came in, and we have a few more minutes, so let me read these off. Do you have information on where the Louisiana cost study can be found?
Okay, it was Indiana, and I can email it to you. If you would like to email it to me, I could certainly email it to you. I do have it. It's a very scientific study. It has an executive summary that explains how they did it, but then there's all of their scientific methods are in there as well. So if you will email me, I can email it to you.
Okay, I just sent your email to the person who asked the question.
Okay.
What is being done to encourage police to, questions are coming in fast, hold on. What is being done to encourage police to do suspect exams for rapists? I'm not sure if you know the answer to that question.
I really don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. Yeah, right. Well, we'll see if we can find someone who does know that answer to that question. That question actually might be something you could, the person who's asking could ask the email to the International Association of Forensic Nurses. I know they do some work or they have done some work in that area, and they might know the answer to that. Another question, can states use federal Debbie Smith money? Seems like maybe there might be more to that question.
The answer to that is absolutely. For arrestee DNA, yes, they can.
Okay.
I know for certain because I know the state of New Mexico does use that, and I know that Debbie Smith money is available without a state match for arrestee DNA.
Okay. From all the states that have arrestee laws, how many of them have implemented them? That's a good question.
You know, I really don't know the answer to that question. I do because there's delayed implementation in some of the states. Most states actually do have delayed implementation. I know California had they phased it in. There are other states that are phasing it in. Most states have. I know of a couple that have not. I know South Carolina has not implemented it. But most states that have passed it have either implemented or have a target date in the future.
Okay. And have there been any court challenges to arrestee DNA testing?
Yes, there have. Right now, there have been several. The highest state court that has ruled on it is the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of Virginia, which upheld their arrestee DNA statute. And the highest federal court that has ruled at this point is the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which upheld the ruling. You know, we really believe that ultimately this will be decided by the United States Supreme Court. There are ongoing challenges. We believe that it will ultimately go to the United States Supreme Court, and we feel confident that they will uphold it. I can tell you I wouldn't be devoting my life to getting it passed if I thought ultimately it would be struck down. But there's a lot of good, case law where it's been upheld. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals case that upheld the ruling was the name of the case was Mitchell, and that was just in July of this year that ruling was announced.
Okay. Great. It looks like that is the end of our questions. Jayann, do you want to leave us with a last closing comment?
Sure. I really believe that the opposition to this law, most of it is based on a misunderstanding of the system of how it works. What we have found is that once people truly understand the science behind the CODA system, the privacy protections that are built in, the way it works, they become supporters of it. I can tell you I have 2 sponsors right now, one in Washington State and one in Connecticut, that in years past fought hard against the law and now are our sponsors because they've become educated. That's the job that DNA Saves does. That's what we do. So I would urge you to become involved in your states, to become vocal. If you belong to a law enforcement organization or other organizations, I would urge you to see if they could not only become supporters of the legislation, but make it a priority of theirs. That's what's happened in this upcoming year in Washington State. The Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs have made it a priority legislation of theirs. So I would urge you to do that. And please get in contact with us through my email address or through the contact information is on our website, www.dnasaves.org. We have testified in 17 states in legislative committees and are more than willing to come and help in any way that we can. So please contact us and please get involved and raise your voices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jayann. We are out of time. I want to let everybody know that the presentation was recorded today, and that webinar will be posted on our website in a few days. I want to remind you to visit our website for future webinars, announcements of future webinars and trainings, and also we have some new materials that will be coming out on the website soon, one in particular on exonerations and victims' rights and needs during that process, and also a frequently asked questions pamphlet that will be about forensic DNA and victims issues, and that will be on our website soon as well. So I encourage you to check out our website, and I want to thank everyone so much for your time, and have a pleasant afternoon.